Unfair discrimination exists whether we like it or not. I wouldn't have married a gum-chewing vegetarian. Ultimately, we'll help the people we discriminate against if we try to understand more about them. Genetics will lead to a world where there is a sympathy for the underdog. We must not discriminate between things. Where things are concerned, there are no class distinctions. We must pick out what is good for us where we can find it. Anything that's for free, people will take. They don't discriminate. Ignorance is the failure to discriminate between the permanent and the impermanent, the pure and the impure, bliss and suffering, the self and the non-self. Neither praise or blame is the object of true criticism. Justly to discriminate, firmly to establish, wisely to prescribe, and honestly to award. These are the true aims and duties of criticism. For some of my friends who raise personal objections to marriage equality, they still recognize the importance of being accepting. And many of them also recognize that regardless of what they choose to believe or practice at home or at their church, that doesn't give them the right to discriminate. And under Obamacare, insurance companies can no longer discriminate against women. Before, some wouldn't cover women's most basic needs, like contraception and maternity care, but would still charge us up to 50% more than men, for a worse plan. A guided missile corrects its trajectory as it flies, homing in, say, on the heat of a jet plane's exhaust. A great improvement on a simple ballistic shell, it still cannot discriminate particular targets. It could not zero in on a designated New York skyscraper if launched from as far away as Boston. Patriotism is best exemplified through autocritique. When you're willing to stand up within the group and say, it is wrong for black people to be anti-Semitic. Or, it is wrong for America to discriminate against persons of African descent and made them slaves and based its wealth upon free labor, it's crucial to say that. I don't discriminate between a boy and girl when it comes to friendship. I don't think we should discriminate against an organization or congregation because they're religious, if they're doing good work. But government can't subsidize proselytizing or worship or religious activity. It can't. Where landmines are indiscriminate, cheap, and brutal, drones are discriminate, expensive, and brutal. And yet they are insufficiently discriminate. The assassination of the Taliban chief Baitullah Masood in Pakistan in 2009 succeeded only on the 17th attempt. Such discussions help us very little to enjoy what has been well done in art or poetry, to discriminate between what is more and what is less excellent in them, or to use words like beauty, excellence, art, poetry, with a more precise meaning than they would otherwise have. I'm drawn more to quality, and so if the quality is in television, I go in that direction. If it's in film, I go in that direction. But I don't limit myself or discriminate against any of the mediums. Suffering does not discriminate. We in the Jewish community must ask ourselves what role we are going to play in changing policies and practices that discriminate against LGBT Americans. We have a special responsibility and civic duty to ensure that all Americans are treated with dignity and equality. I'm a little bit of a make-out king. I don't discriminate too much. We were taught in school, and I was taught at home and in church, that blacks and whites were equal and we should not discriminate based on skin color, even if my school was almost entirely white. I don't like kids that are pushed into things by stage moms, but when I can see they are having a good time, they're excited and enjoying the process, then I think it's wrong to discriminate. Good men, whether they be Christians or rationalists, do not desire to discriminate between races, but the distinctions implanted by nature are too conspicuous to escape the observation of our senses. God does not discriminate against people, regardless of color, religion, social class, or gender and sexual preferences. Children don't mind when something was made, they don't discriminate in that way. I tape very early episodes of Rainbow and Trump Ton for my son and watch them with him. He loves them. Trump Ton was made in 1967, but he still watches it like it's brand new. I do not want to deny anyone their livelihood or civil rights. Who wants to discriminate against anybody? But when it comes to homosexuality, I believe the laws of our land should be in line with God's laws. Ultimately, we'll help the people we discriminate against if we try to understand more about them. Genetics will lead to a world where there is a sympathy for the underdog. It is illegal for the budget department to discriminate among senators. I tend to not discriminate when it comes to people I can learn from. Basically, if someone has built a meaningful business in software, technology or media, faced disruption and adversity, and overcame underdog status. I want to know how they did it. It's unfortunate. Title IX is rather simple: don't discriminate on the basis of sex. The problem with the internet is that it gives you everything: reliable material and crazy material. So the problem becomes, how do you discriminate? When you discriminate against anyone, you discriminate against everyone. It's a display of terrible intolerance. The red viper enjoys life. He does not discriminate in his pleasures. This is the way he understands life: to live it to its fullest. And to limit yourself in terms of experience doesn't make any sense to him. What's beautiful is beautiful. I can't discriminate. Oh, that's ripe, coming from a straight white man. What's the matter? Baby doesn't feel like he belongs. Well, why don't you try a place that was set up just for you, like the world? Cancer does not discriminate. I usually go for the ethnic ladies. That's kinda my preference, but I don't discriminate. Whether you're a mother or father, or a husband or a son, or a niece or a nephew or uncle, breast cancer doesn't discriminate. I used to be homophobic, but as I got older, I realized that wasn't the way to do things. I don't discriminate against anybody for their sexual preference, for their skin color. That's immature. I am often asked why there is discrimination against women in science, and I have given it some thought. With prejudicial attitudes, you can't really do much. You can point out when people discriminate and ask them not to. When I was at Newsweek magazine, which, this really sounds like I walked 4 miles in the snow to school, but I started at Newsweek magazine in 1963, which was before the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So it was actually legal to discriminate against women, and Newsweek did. I've always seen our faith as an instrument to embrace our fundamental equality, before God and before our laws, and not as a license to discriminate. I just think in this world of extreme religious pluralism, the great spectrum of things ranging from the healthy and the respectable, and the balance and the true and tried, you go down to quite bizarre things which are very risky for people, particularly people who are young or vulnerable or unable to discriminate. So if there is a government grant offered for anything, like starting a business or going to school, they cannot discriminate because of your age. The Rosa and Raymond Parks Institute accepts people of any race. We don't discriminate against anyone. We teach people to reach their highest potential. I set examples by the way I lead my life. I'm not saying that hip-hop needs gay rappers or anything, but they need to stop being so close-minded because that will just cause the genre to fail. Look at pop. Pop doesn't discriminate against people. Look at Lady Gaga, you know what I mean? Not to discriminate every moment some passionate attitude in those about us, and in the very brilliancy of their gift some tragic dividing on their ways, is, on this short day of frost and sun, to sleep before evening. There are surely times when a conservative and a liberal would agree. We would agree on how moral it is to discriminate on the basis of race. There's absolutely no light between those two positions. It becomes a little more complex when you talk about law as opposed to morality. For me, I grew up in a house doing charity work for homeless people, and my parents had a lot of homeless friends. We were always taught to not discriminate and not judge. The attacks in Jordan, just like those before it in Indonesia, Egypt, Spain and the United States, demonstrate that terrorism does not discriminate by race, ethnicity, or region. Instead, terrorists indiscriminately target those seeking to live a peaceful, loving, and free life. It is difficult to discriminate the voice of truth from amid the clamor raised by heated partisans. Our religion does not discriminate according to color, sex, or anything else. What counts is piety and faith. Silver, gold, I don't discriminate. I like sparkly things. It is a rule of international law that weapons and methods of warfare which do not discriminate between combatants and civilians should never be used. Visit our website for more quotes, quoting.com.